the What Bitcoin Did podcast.
Hi there from Boston. How are you all? Welcome to the What Bitcoin Did podcast, which is brought to you by Kraken, the best place to buy, sell, and trade digital currencies. I'm your host, Peter McCormack, and today I've got an interview recorded with Wertheimer. But before that, I got a message from my show sponsors. So first up, we got Dropbit, the best Bitcoin wallet I've used, the best Bitcoin wallet I've found in the App Store. And also, they made a huge announcement this week, which is super cool. You can now send Bitcoin to someone via their Twitter handle. I've played with it. It's super cool. And like everything else they build, the UX is amazing. So you just go into your Dropbit app, you select someone's Twitter handle once you've connected your account, and as soon as you send them some Bitcoin, it tweets them and it lets them know. It's brilliant. It's such a cool feature. I'm going to be playing with it, and I'm definitely going to do a competition with it soon. I'm going to be giving away some Bitcoin via Twitter, so look out for that. They're also sponsoring my party in San Francisco at Bitcoin 2019. If you're in San Fran for the event and you want to come, let me know. But definitely go and check out Dropbit. They are like the Venmo for Bitcoin with amazing UX. It's such a cool wallet. If you want to find out more, it's available on iPhone and Android. Just head over to dropbit.app, which is dropbit.app. And next up is my new sponsor, Accounting. Without doubt, the best crypto tax and portfolio management solution in the market. And not only that, it's the best price crypto tax calculator out there, and you only pay when you want to export your report. So you might as well go and play with it. You might as well go and check it out. And they've also just updated their website and the tool, improving on what was already amazing UX. I go on about UX a lot. I think it's so important, and Accounting are brilliant at it. If you're taking your tax reporting seriously, then definitely go and check them out. You can import your data from all major exchanges and wallet providers. And as I said, you only pay when you download your tax report. It's a no-brainer. Go and check out Accounting at accounting.com, which is accointing.com. Okay, so on to my interview with Udi. And this is kind of a bit of a different interview from my normal ones. This is just more of a general chat. Me and Udi have had plenty of banter over Twitter over the last year. We've bumped heads on a few things, but, you know, I think we kind of respect each other and what we do. And after my comment about 2 Bitcoins, where I was saying that people come into Coinbase, they see Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash and might be confused, and that kind of stirred up a whole bunch of conversations. I had a chat with Udi because he recorded a podcast talking about it, ripping me, calling me Pedro. So I was like, come on, dude, come on the show, let's talk about it. And he did, and we discussed a bunch of things. It's just more of a general chat, though. It's quite friendly, it's quite mild, actually. But I think one of the interesting things is the amount of things we agreed on. But I'm glad we did it. I hope you enjoyed it. You know, if you've got any questions, you can reach out to me. And also, I am in the States. I'm in Boston. It's a great city. I'm staying near Fenway Park, which is super cool. The owners of them own Liverpool, so big fans of them. And I've just recorded a couple of interviews today. I was over at MIT and I recorded with Taj again, talking about UTXO and Nihar, just talking about what MIT are doing with their digital currency initiative. So that's super cool. Tomorrow I fly to Washington for a really special interview. And after that, I'm off to meet Charlie Shrem. Going to go and hang out with him for a couple of days and record a show with him. And then I'll be heading to SF for Bitcoin 2019. Loads happening. And listen, if you want to support the show, there's a whole bunch of things you can do. Just head over to my website. That's whatbitcoindid.com and click on the support section. And if you've got any questions, you want to reach out to me, my email address is hello@whatbitcoindid.com. So one of the things that's become a bit of a meme or a bit of a joke is that I'm not technical, right? And one of the things I've always wanted my show to be is to help people who aren't technical, because we're told to always do your research before you invest in anything, make sure you understand it. But I think Bitcoin's really hard. There's not only a lot of technical things to understand, there's a lot of economic things to understand, but the worst thing actually on all of that, there's also a lot of history to understand. A history of people, things which have happened. So there's a lot. So I've always thought I'll never know which show someone may first listen to mine with, but I always want them to understand every time if it's the first one, it's a non-technical show. So I always kind of repeat that point. So it would be good, I think, as a starting point, because we don't know each other that well, apart from slinging on Twitter. What's your background, man? Like, what is your background and what is it you do?
So my background is, I guess, software development. I worked in the past at eBay, PayPal, and smaller startups. And I guess probably around 2015 or 16, I think it was 2016, I started working, more professionally in the Bitcoin blockchain space, at a company called Kolu in Tel Aviv. At the time, we were working on a colored coins protocol that was on top of Bitcoin, and basically it was kind of like Ethereum's ERC20. It just was earlier and what was less useful. So that's what it was. And well, at some point after Kolu, I started working, as an independent developer and consultant in our great space, which means sometimes it means, helping businesses that use Bitcoin to do so more efficiently or learn about, new stuff like Lightning or whatever. And it also means working with more of shitcoin type companies to help them understand why they don't need a blockchain, why it's bad for them. So that's also something that I try to do sometimes.
Right, so you will consult on what they're doing is wrong, but you won't necessarily work on alternative blockchains.
I mean, I wouldn't say I would work on them. I try to convince people that they're bad, but yeah. I mean, bad for them, Sometimes you're a business and you can, you want to build a product, like, I don't know, you want to build an app for doing your laundry or something. And for some reason, someone comes up with the idea to do a blockchain. And so usually it's because it's going to be easier to raise funds. But you know what? So fine, you raise your funds. And now what? I mean, how do you get out of this hole that you promised a blockchain that does laundry? Yeah.
So do you think there's any other use for a blockchain? I don't want to say outside of monetary terms, because obviously the Bitcoin blockchain is now being used for non-financial transactions. We saw the announcement from Microsoft recently, but it feels like the Bitcoin blockchain can be used to anchor all kinds of information. But have you seen any use of a blockchain outside of Bitcoin where you're like, maybe not even that it's just not a nonsense idea, but you think there's maybe something there, there's maybe some use, you'll give it a bit of time?
Yeah, so I can think of, off the top of my head, I can think of 2 use cases maybe that are not completely crazy. One of them is domain names. So here's the thing, I can think of 2 use cases, but I think that they're very boring and unsexy, but they're use cases. So one of them is domain names, and I think that they kind of work because they're purely digital, they're not representing something else, they're purely digital, and you can trade them with someone else. So they seem to make sense. You want to have one ownership, and the order of things matters. So it feels like it might be useful, but we already have a domain name system and everyone's using it, and I don't think that a blockchain based one is meaningfully better. So I don't know. So that's one. The other one is probably about timestamping, and which is kind of what Microsoft does, because you can prove that something existed before a certain point. And something interesting that you can do that's not immediately obvious, Peter Todd calls it proof of publication. It means that you can prove that something did not happen. So it's not only that you can prove that something happened before some point. If you have a specific protocol, you can say, okay, some transaction did not happen. This money was not spent. So you can do that with other stuff too. So sometimes it's interesting. But again, I'm not sure that's enough, because blockchains are really, for developers, right? They're really a mess to work with. They're expensive, they're hard to maintain, they're inefficient. So you need to have a really good reason to use one.
And where do you sit with Ethereum? Because I don't own any Ethereum, but one of the things I've always thought with it is that there's a huge amount of people doing things with it, building things, building products that have some usage, limited usage. And I always hear the arguments from technical people that it's just ridiculous what they're building. It doesn't make sense. ETH2 is going to be a nightmare, probably can't be delivered. Yeah, I found something like MakerDAO very difficult to ignore. Whilst I don't understand whether it makes sense or not. I don't understand if it's something that will collapse in the future. I don't understand if it maybe is just a tool for people who have a whole stack of ETH, and therefore it's kind of like this own little economy for people who have a lot of ETH, which have some kind of assumed value in the market. But where do you sit with the ETH?
Yeah, so I'm an iPhone guy. I have an iPhone. I don't have an Android. And most of my Bitcoin friends make fun of me about this constantly. And what I always say is, look, I understand. I owned an Android phone for like 2 or 3 years. I tried it. I didn't like it, so I went back. You know, I know what I'm talking about. It's not for me. And
I don't get Android phones, by the way. I think they're horrible. Every single time I've used
Yeah,
one, they are horrible, and I don't understand
I
it.
don't get it at all. And some of them are like really expensive, you know, because people say iPhones are expensive, so you get an Android. That's a good point. But some of the Android phones are super expensive too.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, so the thing with Ethereum, I used to be a huge fan. You know, when Ethereum, before it launched, I installed all of their pre-release software. I tried typing my own weird smart contracts back in, when was it? I think 2014 or 15, probably 15. So I used to be a fan. I was super excited by it. I really was. And over time, I guess, and I think that a lot of people came to this realization, but it's just that some of us were early enough to go through the process. So over time, it just seems like there's nothing useful you can do with it. You know, so because, you know, I like to say that using blockchains to represent real world assets like apartments and securities and so on, I think it doesn't make a lot of sense. And I say this because it was my job to research use cases for those things for about a year, right? Like 3 years ago. I've been there, you know, I'm not just saying things because it sounds fun. I've tried finding those things. We've been working on it for a long time. I really don't believe in it. So so it's fine if other people, you know, maybe we were early, maybe we were stupid, maybe, I don't know, but it's fine if other people find something. But as far as I'm concerned, we couldn't find anything for many years. So before MakerDAO, actually, we had, you know, we had the ICOs. So everyone was saying, look, Ethereum found its use case, its ICOs, and it's great. And let's put aside I don't like ICOs, right? I think they're not fair to investors, which means that they can't really exist for very long. But fine, you know, let's say that they're great. So the thing about ICOs in Ethereum, why do you need Ethereum to do an ICO? So what's an ICO? You have a primary market, whereas an issuer creates an asset and sells it to the market. So at the beginning, people said Ethereum is great for a primary market because we can write a smart contract that includes all of the terms of the sale and makes everything automatic and fair. But over time, it seemed that, one, it's very inefficient, but two, you can do the same without smart contracts. So you can build a website and say, send all of your money to this address, and we'll have a script on the server side that checks how much money was in there and create tokens and give it to you. And anyone who wants to can later check that everything was made by the rules, you know? So you don't have a smart contract that is hard to maintain and is easy to hack maybe. You have a traditional system, but you can still, everything is transparent, you can still check it. So for the actual fundraiser, I don't think it's necessary. And we see that ICOs today don't use a smart contract for the actual fundraiser. And then you have the token as a smart contract. And that seems like a waste too, because we have other systems like, you know, Stellar, for example. I like to make fun of all shitcoins, but Stellar is, if you want to issue a token, I think that Stellar is much more efficient to do that because it's built for that. They have, you know, native tokens, and it's easy to do everything you want, and it just works better. So if that's what you want, so then people will say, yeah, but Ethereum is more secure, and that, it's unclear what it says because it's just a record of transactions. And an interesting way to think about that is that we can see that a lot of tokens are migrating now from Ethereum to other blockchains. For example, a lot of tokens are migrating to Binance's blockchain now from Ethereum. So how can a token migrate? Well, it's easy because it's just a history of transaction. It's easy to just say, okay, from 2017 to 2019, it was on Ethereum, and from 2019 to 2022, it's going to be on Binance, and everyone's okay with it. You don't need, you know, the security of the blockchain doesn't mean much when it's an asset that is external to the native blockchain itself. So that's about ICO. So and we see that, you know, when I said this in 2017, people said, no, you don't understand. You know, Ethereum is going to change the world with ICOs, and now we see that you don't need Ethereum for ICOs, even if you think they're great. And MakerDAO, I think it's similar in the way that I mean, what is MakerDAO really? It's a way for you to take a loan from someone else and collateralize it with ethers. Now, there are a lot of companies who do that. You have, I think one of them is even a sponsor of the show. So you can give them ether and they're going to give you a loan in dollars back. That's pretty much what they do. So you can definitely do it in a centralized way, and it seems to be more efficient and cheaper. So that seems like a good deal.
But MakerDAO allows you to do it without KYC sign-up forms, right?
Right. So it does, but why? I mean, how can they do that? So they would claim that they can do that because it's decentralized and they can't be stopped. But is that true? So one interesting thing about MakerDAO, for it to work, the system needs to know the price, the Ether USD price, right? It's not internal to the Ethereum system. You need to somehow find out what it is. And the way you usually do this stuff in Ethereum or other systems is by using what they call an oracle, which means basically it's someone who has permission to say, this is the truth, and let's continue from there. So they have an oracle that would say the price of Ether is such and such, but we don't know who the oracle is. So the way they do it, they have, I think, if I remember correctly, the number is 14. I think they have 14 accounts that are permission to state what the price is, and they probably do an average or something like that, or maybe they all have to report the same number. But we don't know who those 14 people are. So let's say the state of New York doesn't like it and they want to put a stop to it. So what they need to do is to find those 14 people and not even stop all of them, just make some of them stop, and then the system doesn't work anymore. So I'm not sure why is it better.
Well, I actually saw somebody tweet about it that they think KYC will come to MakerDAO within the next year, and then somebody will probably fork it off and do an alternative version.
Yeah. It might have been me.
Was that actually you? I don't remember seeing it. I tell you something also, smart contracts. The thing I don't understand about smart contracts, like I understand what they are and what they're used for, but I don't see a lot of businesses actually wanting to migrate across to adopting smart contracts because from what I've seen, bugs are always found. Bugs are inherent in technology. That's why the move slow with Bitcoin is a very good thing. But bugs can be, so with the parity, it wasn't really a hack, was it? I mean, somebody hacked a smart contract, but it wasn't. There was a bug in the smart contract that allowed ETH to be frozen.
Right.
I think of companies who have a huge amount of money which they want to move around the world, probably like the fact that if something goes wrong, things can be rewound, things can be undone. The problem with smart contracts and an immutable database is that you can't undo things once they've been actioned. Otherwise, what's the point of a blockchain? Therefore, I think smart contracts are just going to be way too risky for risk-averse global corporations. How do you feel about that?
I fully agree. I mean, it just isn't clear what a corporation would use that for. I guess that maybe some, if I'm trying to steelman this, I guess that some Ethereum people would say that it's not for current financial institutions and that it's for a new, generation of businesses that would be able to do business differently. But
and who don't make mistakes.
Yeah, or we just all live with the mistakes. I don't know, or we vote on it. It's interesting. Recently, probably a few days ago, actually, the largest bank in Israel released some new product, which is basically some digital notary thing that they do for clients. And they talked about this product. They've been pumping it for 2 years, and they always said that they're going to use a blockchain for it, right? It's just a way for the bank to sign papers and hand it off to you, right? That's basically what it is. So, and they pumped it up about using a blockchain with it. And I always use this example with clients to say, this is how you not do a blockchain and how you're going to drag development for years and not do anything useful with it. And they finally released it without the blockchain a few days ago. Because, you try it for enough time, you realize you don't need it and it's going to make life hard for you. And eventually you put in a ton of backdoors inside so that you can revert stuff if they go wrong. So what's the point? Really, what's the point?
So all these ETH lovers, whether it's a developer, somebody working on a project, to Joe Lubin, what are they all getting wrong? This is where I'm like, there appears to be tens of thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands of people interested in this. What is it they've got wrong? And also, are people like Vitalik, do you think they know it's screwed? Or do you think they're just kicking the can down the road constantly because they've dug a hole so deep they can't actually turn around and go, you know what, this was just a fucking terrible idea?
Well, where do they get wrong? I mean, I don't want to say they're wrong, but
What are they seeing different?
yeah, well, developers, it's not specific to blockchains. Developers like new and cool technology, right? So developers like building stuff with the latest frameworks, the latest libraries, the latest everything. And, working with cryptography, working with decentralized or distributed protocols, it's interesting, it's challenging, it's fun. So I can see why developers would try to fit this into stuff. It's really not special to blockchains. It happens with everything, Facebook releases a React Native, which is a framework for cross-platform mobile apps, and then, everyone wants to use it, even though it's sometimes way blown out of proportion. You don't need it. So it's not special in that regard. And then people tend to say, okay, you know what? I need an app. It could benefit from cryptography, right? It could benefit from digital signatures. It would add some integrity to our data. So if we need digital signatures, let's just use Ethereum. If we need public key cryptography, let's just use Ethereum because it has everything already. And from an engineering standpoint, it's not a very good idea. But if you're just trying to do something cool, then I can see why some people will start that way, just because it seems fun and buzzworthy. If you're a business person, you realize that it's going to be easy to create hype around your product. So that's probably a good reason too.
I think also possibly we're missing enough analysts or designers. And when I say designers, I don't just mean graphic designers like process designers, UX designers, because my very simple analogy is I, previous to this, had a web development business. We were a company of 35 people, of which 10 were programmers. Not a single thing our clients wanted could we have delivered without the programmers. We had some really smart guys, both .NET and PHP, but they never went to client meetings. They never went to pick up the requirements for the client or discuss it with the client, because I always found with the developer, they're very good at building stuff, but not so great at understanding how a customer might use it. So I always found that you would want something like a business analyst or a UX person in between who could understand the client requirements and then relay that into a brief for a UX designer and then relay that into a brief for a developer. And you kind of needed 3 or 4 people to make something that was useful. I've often found in perhaps, and even within Bitcoin, but within kind of crypto projects, there seems to be a lot of developers, but not so many of maybe the business analyst or the UX people who are making the connection between real use cases and what's being built. And therefore we come to that place where we're trying to find a home for blockchains when there really isn't a need for them.
Right. I fully agree with you. It's not only that a lot of companies miss those key roles in the company. It's also, the reason that it's hard to tell what customers want is because there are no customers. For most of these projects, there's no need at all. You start with a product that no one needs and no one wants, and then you just let developers build it. And you get no market data, you get no use data because there is none. There's literally none. The top dApps. I don't want to just say numbers because I don't remember, but it's nothing really. No one's using them. So that's the thing, and you have a good reason for it, because the reason those projects exist in the first place, a lot of the times, and I don't want to say always, but a lot of the times it's because it just sounds cool to say blockchain and they know they're going to raise some funds. And then they don't care that there's no real use, So these kind of projects are probably very hard to salvage, I guess.
Yeah, I do have a certain amount of sympathy for stablecoins, and I'll tell you why. Look, they are ugly. Okay, they are antithetical to what people who believe in Bitcoin are trying to get away from. They have the ability to block addresses. There's lots of ugly things about them. But then if I think in terms of the use case, so a great example would be, say my son, and say we have Facebook coin, global coin, whatever it is. I'm just kind of imagining what it is. But say he's out and about and he needs some money from me. And he says, say he's traveling. Say he's traveling the world and he's like, Dad, I'm out of money. I'm stuck. Can you send me some money? And say I can send him £100. If I could just go via WhatsApp and go click send and it's with him and he can instantly spend that, that to me kind of makes sense. I'm kind of like, okay, that makes sense. That's better than Bitcoin because it's probably firstly instant. Secondly, there's no kind of fluctuations in price we have to worry about. And I don't have to go via the banks and then he waits for the bank and the transfer. I kind of get that argument because I can see how I would use it, even though they're ugly and kind of nonsense. But that is one of the few use cases where I'm like, okay, despite it being antithetical to Bitcoin and despite it still being part of the traditional system, I know I would use it.
Sure. I don't think that anything that's not Bitcoin is inherently bad. I mean, I have a bank account. I use it every day. I have a credit card, a debit card. I use it,
You evil statist.
Yeah. I use it. I need it. I would be in a bad state if I didn't have it. Okay, so I can see why people would want things that are not Bitcoin. The thing is about stablecoins. So you want to send some money abroad and you want it to do so instantly. You have options to do that, right? You can do. There are apps that will do that for you. Some of them are really cheap too. Some of them, have good rates. Mostly the new, fintech, new age stuff. So they work pretty well. So the question is, why do you need a blockchain to do the same thing essentially? And some people would say, well, it's Facebook, so it's going to be huge and everyone will be using it. And that's a legitimate point, although they tried it in the past and failed with Facebook credits and other kind of currencies. But let's say, they could still make it for sure. So that's a legitimate argument. But then why do they need a blockchain? Just do it like Venmo does it with their own infrastructure. It would be easier. They're employing a ton of really smart engineers to work on this, and I guess they can because they have a lot of money. But you have to ask, why do you need all of those geniuses to build something that you could do much more easily and much faster too? I just don't get it. And we'll probably know more when it comes out. I expect that it would look very, very similar to apps like Venmo, and I expect that any connection to cryptocurrencies would be very artificial at best, which is what they should do. I mean, that's the right way to go. I would be very surprised if it would work similarly to something like Tether or USDC, where you can just put it in your wallet and send it to someone else without anyone being involved. And to that point, stablecoins like the stablecoins we have today, I also think, the thing is they can still, they can freeze your account, and I'm sure that in a few years we will see them doing that. There's no way around it. And then it will be pretty much like PayPal. But for now, until regulators fully catch on and until, while they still have to gain some competitive advantage and they still maybe sometimes close an eye to things that happen on the system, for now it's kind of useful. And I think that the thing that's maybe you have a problem, maybe you're getting paid with Bitcoins, for example, and you have a problem to redeem them and get them into your bank because your bank doesn't like Bitcoins, or I don't know, whatever. So sometimes you can use the stable coins to move between exchanges while keeping the value and so on, which will eventually help you do what you're trying to do. So it could be useful. I'm not saying it's not, but what I'm saying is that it's temporary. My vision, my goal, my hope for Bitcoin would be that it's not a temporary thing and that people will use it long after we're gone. That's my hope for Bitcoin. And for USDC, people are going to use it for 2 years. that's the thing, because it's a loophole, that's what it is. So
yeah, it's actually kind of a little bit more scary than the rest of the financial system, because I expect we have zero privacy really.
Yeah.
With some of these stable coins.
Yeah.
And I think maybe in the future we will come back and look at something like Tether and go, actually, Tether was probably is the best, because
yeah. There's also it's the way that companies and businesses implement support for these stable coins is kind of worrisome. If you want to redeem USDC through Circle, then you're going to have to send them to your account at Circle, and they would give each person one Ethereum address that never changes. And so do most exchanges that use USDC. So basically, anyone who knows your address can see everything that all of the dollar transactions that you've ever made. It's not just Circle and their partners. It's anyone who manages to understand that this is your address. While in Bitcoin, not everyone does it, but a lot of businesses try to generate a new address every time. And then even if you know something, it's difficult to trivially understand everything about your transactions.
All right, well, let's talk about Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is king. So firstly, you're not really a fan of the term Bitcoin maximalism, because I've seen it a few times. You've kind of questioned what people mean by that. What is the background to that?
So the first time I've seen the term Bitcoin maximalism was in a blog post by Vitalik Buterin. I think, it was many years ago. By the way, Vitalik is an amazing author, really. Most of his blog posts, most of his, Reddit posts are amazing, or definitely worth a read. He's also way ahead of his time. But the specific blog post I'm referring to was about maximalism. And I think it feels like he coined the term. I don't know if it's true, but it feels like he coined the term. And, it's not, what is Bitcoin maximalism? Does it mean that I don't think that, you should use any asset that isn't Bitcoin? Is that what it means? I mean, that, I shouldn't have a house, I shouldn't have a car, I shouldn't have stocks, I shouldn't have dollars. Is that, I shouldn't have clothes. What am I allowed to have as a maximalist, apart from Bitcoin? So some people would say,
well, I think it's cryptocurrency related.
Right. So the next question, would be, what's a cryptocurrency? Because if you're saying the only cryptocurrency that maximalists like is Bitcoin, then you need to know what cryptocurrencies are. And then, someone told me, cryptocurrencies are like porn. You know it when you see it. But I don't always know it when I see it. Is USDC cryptocurrency? I don't know. It's dollars. And what happens if Apple issues their stocks on Ethereum? So you have, I don't know, you can buy Apple stocks on Ethereum. Is that a cryptocurrency now? Obviously, it would be the top coin by market cap on CoinMarketCap, because it's Apple. It's bigger than Bitcoin. So is that a cryptocurrency now? So I really don't know what a cryptocurrency is. It's something that uses digital signatures. My bank account uses digital signatures. I don't know. I really don't know what it means. You want to say, well, cryptocurrencies are Bitcoin and Litecoin and Monero because they have limited supply and they have, so maybe, you can try to find some kind of properties, but most of the assets don't share these properties. So what it seems to me, maybe in 2013, 2014, 2016, when you looked at CoinMarketCap, you could say, okay, these assets seem to share something in common. I think that today you can't. You really can't. There are assets there of all kinds, of all types. And the only reason they're there, many of them, the only reason they're there is because it looks good and it's easy to find traders and investors that way. I don't know what a cryptocurrency is anymore. So it's hard for me to define myself as a maximalist.
Yeah, well, perhaps the better term is Bitcoiner. People who support Bitcoin only really have an interest in Bitcoin. We might not be able to hard define it as you've said, but we can loosely define it as anything that's on CoinMarketCap that isn't Bitcoin, essentially.
So yeah, so that's usually what it comes down to. It's things that are CoinMarketCap and not Bitcoin. That's not a very useful definition because, well, for many reasons. But sure, and I'm fine with Bitcoiner. I will say this: I hope that we get real competitors to Bitcoin. I want there to be real competitors to Bitcoin. I would happily invest if there's something that seems like a competitor to Bitcoin, in that it achieves, or hopefully could achieve, the goals that I hope Bitcoin will achieve. So I'm okay with competition. I just don't think we have any.
Why do you think it needs a competitor? Why do you want the competition to Bitcoin? Hasn't Bitcoin done enough now to prove it's useful? And would that not create another split and potentially lose very good quality developers, of which there aren't a lot, onto a separate project?
Sure, but that's the nature of competition. why would I want competition? The main reason is because I'm not convinced that Bitcoin will succeed. I'm not convinced that Bitcoin will survive.
Interesting.
I hope it will. I'm somewhat optimistic that it will, but I'm definitely not convinced. So that's the main reason why I would want some competition. But it just doesn't exist. I mean, competition would mean things like immutability. So when I say mutability, I don't mean that it should be impossible to change past transactions. I mean that the properties of the asset, Bitcoin is an asset, and it has monetary, it has monetary properties and financial properties. And I'm talking about those properties staying as they are and not changing over time. So we know that we have 21 million Bitcoins. We know that we won't have more. And this is very special to Bitcoin. You can say that Litecoin would only have 84 million Litecoins, but it's not about what the code base says. It's more about, the community, and is the community going to be toxic and terrible about it if someone tries to change the 21 million property. And we know that for Bitcoin, it's probably going to be true. For most of the other assets, I would say all of them. I don't think that the community is strong enough to prevent this kind of manipulation, which means that what are they for again? So if you can change properties of the asset, Ethereum keeps changing the assets of ethers. So if you can change this, what are we doing here? Why is this interesting? Just print them on a SQL database and give them away. It's much easier. So if something comes up and manages to do the same, I'm all for it. I really am.
Next up, I talk to Udi more about Bitcoin. We talk about a bunch of different things relating to it, such as Hyperbitcoinization and guest selection for my show. But before that, I do have a message from my sponsors. So first up, we got BlockFi, my oldest sponsor. I'm very loyal to these guys. They've really supported the show, and I really want to help them. I want them to have a successful business. I like what they're doing. I like both their products. I think their interest accounts are super interesting, and I think their crypto-backed loans are a great product. They're doing a great job. They're building a solid crypto financial business. But yeah, if you want to go and check them out, you can head over to blockfi.com. You can find out all about their recent announcement where they are offering support for the Gemini stablecoin across their platform. BlockFi interest account clients at launch are eligible to earn 6.2% APY paid monthly with a minimum balance of 2,500 GUSD, and balances above 100,000 GUSD will earn a tiered rate of 1.5% APY. BlockFi also offers GUSD as a USD funding option and as collateral for institutional crypto borrowers. And BlockFi's USD loan rates start as low as 4.5%. As I said, when I get back to England, I'm going to be checking this out. I'm going to be putting some of my surplus funds in there every month to earn interest. It's super cool. Love what they're doing. If you want to find out more, head over to blockfi.com, which is BLOCKFI.com. Next up is Kraken, without doubt the best run crypto exchange in the world, bar none. Not just because they're a sponsor, but for everything they do, the way they run the business, the way they take care of their customers, and the way they care about security. It is the only place I use now for buying and selling my Bitcoin, and it's the exchange I trust more than any other. I've spent so much time getting to know them, understanding their business, and you know what? It is amazing. It is amazing the way they look after their company, look after their staff, and look after their clients. They care about the industry so much. And because of their deep focus on security, including the creation of Kraken Security Labs, which is their dedication to helping the industry, they are without doubt the best exchange out there. I've got an interview coming up with Nick Pokoko, their Chief Security Officer, where we're going to be talking about all aspects of crypto security. With all the exchange hacks happening, who are you going to trust? I know it's Kraken for me. So if you want to join me in supporting Kraken, head over to kraken.com, which is KRAKEN.com. Why are you not convinced that Bitcoin will succeed?
Well, there are so many things that can go wrong, Obviously, governments are going to do what they can to make, regulation requirements more difficult. We're already seeing this, and people might lose interest. This is definitely possible. And I'm personally mostly concerned about privacy and fungibility. It seems like a pretty big bug in the Bitcoin implementation that you can just track where transactions go. And it's true that there are a lot of things that we can do to improve that already. People who are privacy conscious can improve their privacy hygiene, which is important. They can do this today, and Bitcoin is maybe the best cryptocurrency to do that with if you know what you're doing. But it's not good enough. It's not good enough, and that's a risk. If we get to a point where people say, okay, this is a coin-based Bitcoin, and this is a Bitfinex Bitcoin, and this is a fresh Bitcoin off miners, and they're not all the same, they have different prices, then we're going to have a problem.
Yeah, I've heard about this before. Dan Held was one that said to me, there's no market for tainted Bitcoins. And he said if there were, then they would run at a lower price. He would buy them all up, hop and bounce them a few times, and then resell them.
Yeah, that's possible. In a way, I guess maybe that would calm me down to see a market like that show up and to see that things still work. But for now, it sometimes makes me a little nervous. I guess it's not accurate that there's no market at all. So you can say that we know that people are sometimes buying fresh coins from mining pools at a premium, maybe 5%, 10% more. If you buy it fresh from a mining pool, and then they don't know who you are, or the rest of the people can't tell where the coins came from. So, there is a price to that. It's not super common, I guess. So,
right, okay.
So yeah.
All right. Well, listen, I've bumped up against Bitcoin's immune system a few times since the start of the podcast. It's not just something new. There's just more people you bump up against. And I've tried to first understand Bitcoin on multiple different levels, but also I do like to throw out challenging questions or listen to contrarian views, because I think the more information I hear, the better. And I know my little podcast cannot damage Bitcoin in any way at all. But there is something that I keep seeing where if you can get into a discussion / argument with somebody and you don't agree with them, you often get this statement that comes back that is, oh, well, you don't understand Bitcoin. So that's a term I've heard. And I've also run across some toxic levels of Bitcoin defense, which is in some quarters fully supported and loved because it protects Bitcoin. Sometimes definitely oversteps the mark. And I've also seen some opinions recently. So, for example, somebody said Bitcoin mass adoption isn't required. And I'm starting to see people talk about, we're not trying to create better money. We're trying to create a better financial system, trying to create better money for the world by having Bitcoin as potentially something like with safety would be like a Bitcoin standard. Okay, so I'm starting to think, well, does not understanding what Bitcoin means, it means you don't understand the goal, and therefore is the goal to create a better financial system because we can hold governments responsible, and if we get hyperbitcoinization, we'll have a better world. Therefore, anything that gets close to threatening that needs to be killed. Like, it needs to just be killed, whether it is a Bcash with Roger, whether it is another alternative coin, whether it is a podcaster which says something slightly controversial, whatever it is, if you get anything which is a threat, we're going to crush you like a bug because this is our immune system. Is that what understanding Bitcoin means?
No. Okay, I'll try to unpack this. Because that's a lot. Well, okay. So first of all, understanding Bitcoin, right? It's, there's the quintessential piece by Jameson Lopp about No One Understands Bitcoin, I think it's called, from on CoinDesk. And basically what it's saying is, your personal understanding on Bitcoin evolves over time. And if you think about what you thought about Bitcoin a year ago, it's probably very different than what it is now. And this continues forever for everyone. So, probably even most people who've been in Bitcoin very early, they probably changed their mind a lot of times. I don't think it's a bad thing. I would say that Bitcoin is, that goes back to it being an immutable asset with immutable properties. It is what it is. It's not, it doesn't exist to serve a goal. It's just, that's the way I see it, right? So it's there. It's like gold or other metals. It just exists. You can't change what it is. You can't make more of it or less of it. It just, it just is. And some metals are useful. Hopefully Bitcoin as it is would be useful too. If it's not, it's too bad because we can't change it. I think that's the interesting thing about it though, that we can't change it. So so maybe we find a use and maybe we change our minds about it over time, and that's fine. As long as it doesn't change and it's only us who change what we think about it, I think that's fine. Because, a lot of people say, well, Bitcoiners move goalposts. You used to say that it's an asset for paying for stuff, and now you're saying that it's a store value, and maybe in 2 years you'll say something else. And it's true, a lot of people change what they think about Bitcoin. That's true, but I don't think it's a problem. I mean, that's because Bitcoin is mutable. If you look at Ethereum, then Ethereum has a goal. Maybe the goal changes too, but Ethereum has this goal and they try to change Ether to fit the goal. That's not what Bitcoin is. Bitcoin is, it's a thing and maybe we find use for it. So that's the way I view it. And I think that whatever you think it might be useful for and whatever you think it might be in the future, definitely if someone tells you don't understand Bitcoin, if someone tells me, and by the way, I get it a lot. A lot of people tell me, Udi, you don't get Bitcoin. It happens. But, if someone tells you don't get Bitcoin, I think you can safely ignore them because...
Well, I think the level of arrogance in a statement like that is off the charts.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's probably right. But so what? People are sometimes arrogant. There are all types of people, and some of them have their own reasons to be arrogant. I don't know. I don't think that it would be correct to say that we have to kill anything that is somehow threatening the hyper-Bitcoinization dream, which is a weird dream to have, by the way. But let's put this aside. So I think that it's not correct to say that we should kill everything that threatens this. But there are other reasons why people are annoyed. So, for example, throughout 2017 and some of 2018, I volunteered a lot at a local Bitcoin embassy where people would come to learn about Bitcoin for the first time. There were a ton of people coming to learn about Bitcoin for the first time. We had probably hundreds of people a day who came from across the country to learn about Bitcoin, probably buy some Bitcoin, probably to buy Ripple later. So there are a ton of people. And you try to explain, and it becomes harder and harder to explain as more of the Bcash and then Bgold and then Be Private and then all the Bitcoin forks come up, and it just becomes harder and harder to explain. And I think that's a big reason why a lot of people are just annoyed. Don't have any patience for this anymore, because it's just annoying. It's not some strategic thing. It's just annoying to keep hearing about it. And I think that at this stage, today, I get why in 2017 we would be, some people, maybe even I was concerned about how people can get confused and buy Bcash by mistake. But I think that now, even the Bcash community isn't, you don't hear them as often saying Bcash is the real Bitcoin. This term kind of slowed down a little bit. I'm not saying they don't say it a lot at all, but they don't push it as hard as they used to, I think. And there's a reason for that. I mean, I think they saw how ridiculous it seems when Craig Wright does the same thing to them. And also, I think it stopped working efficiently because people lost interest. So I just think that at this point, we don't need to be as concerned about it anymore. And then, in a way, it's just annoying, it's distracting. It's okay for it to exist, right? If people want to use it, fine. But I think in a very big way, it's just distracting to keep talking about the philosophy behind it, because there really is none. If I show up and say, I have jewelry made of gold, and you look at it and it's made of steel, you'll say, no, it's not gold. And I can tell you, look, you can't decide for me what's gold. I believe that this is gold. This is how I describe gold. Steel is gold. You can do that. You can say that you disagree with the dictionary and you disagree with everyone else. And if you find a few more people who would say that steel is gold, then you can do it. Is it interesting? I mean, the first time that someone will say it, it's interesting to talk about it. A year later, it's no longer interesting. I mean, they have no idea what they're talking about. Or they're maybe trying to cheat people. I don't know. But either way, it's not gold. And talking about it for 2 years is just boring, I guess.
Yeah, sometimes I think some people maybe, if they've lost the patience with it all, need to hand the baton onto maybe someone who's a bit newer, a bit more patient to explain these things, because every day new people are going to discover Bitcoin. And I previously, when I had my web agency, before I started my agency, I was a UX designer. So I just try and think of the journeys of people. And actually, no, the funny thing was, I got a phone call from an old client the other day who knows I do the podcast. And he said, "Oh, is it time to buy Bitcoin again?" And I was like, well, the time was a few weeks ago. But, if you're going to do it, but just hold it for 10 years and just forget about it. If you've got a diverse set of assets in your portfolio, buy some Bitcoin, get a wallet and put it by for 10 years. And he said, "Oh, I've heard that kind of Bitcoin's done now, really. It's not going to go up much more. What about the other bit?" His actual word was like, "What about the other Bitcoin?" And I was like, "What one?" He said, "Bitcoin Cash. It's cheaper and I've heard it's faster and better and it's an improvement on Bitcoin. Should I buy that Bitcoin instead?" So that's the background to, by the way, 2 Bitcoins. Not that I believe there are 2 Bitcoins. I know there's only 1 Bitcoin. But it was a reference to somebody made to me. Now, if we go on another bull run, if Bitcoin goes above 10,000, which looks like it might do, there's going to be a lot more mainstream press covering it. You know how the articles will flip from Bitcoin being dead to Bitcoin being alive again.
Sure.
And if it keeps going up and then people FOMO in, it hits 20,000, sets new all-time highs, what you were going to see is just another round of FOMO. Thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds, maybe millions of people around the world getting into this, and they're going to go through a journey of, whatever. There'll be multiple journeys. Some will be via Google, some will be via friends, some won't have somebody like me or you to speak to and ask advice. And they're going to come to something like Coinbase, and they're going to, on the very first screen, see 4 or 5 assets which they can choose from. And Bitcoin's going to scare them on price. And they're not going to know straight away that Bitcoin can scale better because of ABC, the history of SegWit, and that Bitcoin Cash was an attack, that Bitcoin Cash can't scale, blah, blah. They're not going to know all this. So I still feel that there needs to be better tools and better ways to educate people on this in a way that they're going to understand very quickly rather than just make bad decisions. Now, this also comes with a couple of conflicts. So when things got a little bit fruity the other day, there was 2 contradictory statements that came out. The first statement was like, "Stop talking about 2 Bitcoins, Pete, you're just confusing noobs." And the contradictory statement is, "Let them get wrecked, that's the only way they'll learn." So I'm like, well, which one do you want? So anyway, I'm not really put a question to you here, but my point being is that I can understand over the space of years that people have got really tired with explaining the same shit over again, and they've been bruised so much by what they consider to be attacks on Bitcoin. It doesn't get away from the fact that millions of people will discover Bitcoin and they will see multiple assets priced differently and hear different arguments about them and will not understand the history. And I personally think we need a better way of succinctly explaining to them why Bitcoin BTC should be their investment.
Right. Well, I get your point. The way I view it from my experience, and I could be wrong, and I'm also not a prophet, but I think that usually attacks on Bitcoin don't repeat the same way. So, the altcoins of 2014, they were like insane altcoins. They were the country coins, the nation coins, like Aurora coin and coins for countries that had nothing to do with the actual country. And they were huge back in 2014, and they disappeared completely. No one's doing that anymore because that's batshit crazy. But and so these attacks change. I would be surprised if Bcash rises again to the heights that it was at before. It could. I'm not saying it won't, but I would be very surprised. So I'm not sure we have to protect very vehemently against this specific thing anymore. We needed to, but not anymore. That being said, sure, we definitely need to explain in some way. I think it's very easy to just say, no, it's not 2 Bitcoins. The Bitcoin Cash thing is like when you buy a fake Rolex, it's not a Rolex, and that's it. That's the explanation. And if someone wants to go into the scaling debates and so on, then sure, there's a lot of history and a lot to describe. But I don't think that's what Bcash is about. Bcash is not about scaling. The differences between Bcash and Bitcoin are not about scaling at all. They're about a bunch of people who didn't like some of the people at the Bitcoin side, and they wanted to split. And the scaling thing was just, it's basically an excuse. And I'm not saying that's wrong. That's okay. That's a legitimate reason. But talking about educating people about scaling is, I don't think it's important. I think that scaling is one of the least important things about Bitcoin right now. And I know that a lot of people would disagree with me, but that's what I think. And in any way, I don't think that newbies who download Coinbase have the tools needed to understand why scaling on Bcash is maybe wrong and scaling on Bitcoin is maybe better. It's just they don't do those things. They're not going to do on-chain transactions at all. They're going to buy in order to hold it, as you said, for 10 years and hopefully be rich. So even if they buy Bcash, they're not going to move it. So they don't care about those things. Generally, most people don't care about those things. So yeah, I think it could be, I think it's much easier to just say, look, it's fake Bitcoin, don't get it. And if you want to buy it, sure, maybe fake Bitcoin will pump, but that's what it is. But yeah, I understand your point too.
I mean, that's pretty succinct then. It's fake Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So what do you think are some of the most important things that need to be focused on with Bitcoin then?
Yeah, well, I think privacy improvements are the most important and interesting in that regard. Things like Taproot and Schnorr are, I'm very optimistic about. And another thing is, so you said before that some people told you that they don't think Bitcoin must be a mainstream success in order to succeed, and I agree with that. I think that Bitcoin could be useful even if not everyone is using it. Even if a small portion of the world is using it, it can still be useful. It is useful today. People are using Bitcoin not to buy groceries or not even to buy houses. They use Bitcoin in other ways.
I had an invoice paid today. So most of my sponsors...
Yeah, sure, but people use Bitcoin that way too. I mean, some of my clients pay me with Bitcoin because it's just easier to get money for me, and for them, it's easier to transfer money that way. But I don't think that's the only way to use Bitcoin, and there are other people using it in other ways, and so it's already useful, right? And personally, I think that we should be more focused. So the way I see Bitcoin, I think, in the next 2 years, in the next 5 years, I would be very surprised if Bitcoin replaces fiat, right? This sounds outwardly to me. I would be very surprised if this happens. So I think that what I want Bitcoin to be is I want it to be a way out for people maybe in trouble. People like to say Venezuela. I'm not specifically thinking about this kind of things, but if a person already has some Bitcoin, then the state has less power over them, and large organizations and large corporations have less power over them. You're that much a freer person because, if something happens to you, you can run away with a portion of your wealth, and that's useful. That's a pessimistic thing to say, that's not, it's not, I don't hope that we get there, right? But I think it's useful to have that as an option for people. So in that kind of view, I think that the most important thing for Bitcoin is to survive, to stick around. What we need to do as Bitcoiners is to make sure that it doesn't disappear. Not that it explodes in growth, just that it doesn't disappear and that it's there if and when people need it. And that's why I'm personally more focused on people already using Bitcoin than on people who are new. It's not because I'm, elitistic and think that the new people aren't important. They're very important and they're great people. But I think that there's a lot to do in Bitcoin to make sure that we protect it. And it's not something that someone who found out about Bitcoin yesterday is going to do. And, one such thing is use your own full node to validate incoming transactions that you get. And this is something that most people don't do. Probably most Bitcoiners don't do that. and it's not as difficult as people think. It's really not. It's doable. You can do it. You don't have to be super technical, and it's getting easier and better. And I think this is something that's very important to focus on. We see Bitcoin Core contributors talking about it with proposals like Assume UTXO that would make Bitcoin Core easier to set up and faster to set up at the first use. There's the project I'm contributing to, which is AB Core, which allows running a full node on Android devices. You have Casa, you have Nodal, you have tons of these companies that make really good hardware now, or good software solutions too, that help you do it. So I'm very optimistic about that. I think that this needs a lot of focus because this prevents a lot of the attacks that we might see in the future. So those are the kind of things I think we should think of.
Do you think hyper-Bitcoinization is realistic, and do you think it itself could be dangerous? Could it cause such a shift into the way governments and countries run that it actually becomes dangerous and causes itself problems?
It always sounded to me like a doomsday scenario, like a world that you wouldn't want to live in, no matter how many Bitcoins you own or don't own, at least for a while. It sounds like a transition like this has to be very violent. I don't know. I think if it happens, it will happen. I don't think that I don't think that the way we behave would change this. If Bitcoin is such a great asset that it will eat all the other currencies, then it will happen. I'm not sure that it will, though. I'm not at all sure that it will happen, and I don't think that it has to happen for Bitcoin to be meaningful. Not at all. I would say that the chances of this. Who am I to say, right? I'm just a developer. But if I have, as some guy, if I have to pin a number on it, it would probably be a pretty low probability that it actually happens. But maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
I hope I have a very good shelter ready if it happens.
Yeah, I don't know. I understand the dream and the desire and the hope for it, and it does sound like a better world, etc., etc. But I just don't know how practical it is. I don't know how practical the migration to that is, and then how realistic a world is based on Bitcoin on a Bitcoin standard. It seems potentially itself dangerous.
Yeah. I mean, I'm with you. I think the theory for how migration works is that people just FOMO into Bitcoin exponentially. In the beginning, it looks like 2017 where people buy Bitcoin because they think they're gonna be rich, and over time, as their fiat devalues, and this can happen quickly, they buy Bitcoin because they're afraid they won't have enough money to eat in a week. So, I mean, is it possible? Yeah. Is it likely? I don't think it's very likely. I think that there are a few things need to happen for this to occur, but I don't know. Maybe. I guess if it happens, then you're better off owning some Bitcoin than not. But I don't think it's going to be a very fun time for anyone. Really, it sounds like it's going to be terrible.
Yeah, that's why I can imagine. I can't see. I could never see the US government just sitting back and letting this happen, and not having some kind of strategy to fight against it.
Yeah, and there's smaller things too. I mean, even before it gets there, your neighbors are gonna hate you. Everyone's gonna hate your guts for buying Bitcoin before them, and it could get ugly if people don't have food. It could get ugly. I mean, it's not something. I don't think that any one of us should hope for this scenario, because it's when people don't have, when they can't buy food, it's not something we should hope for.
Yeah, I prefer the kind of what you were saying as a tool for freedom. I'm heading to the Oslo Freedom Forum on Sunday, Alex Gladstein's event, and I'm covering a panel, Bitcoin Around the World, which talks about real use of Bitcoin in places like the Philippines and how people are actually using it, how it's making their life better. And I kind of feel a lot of warmth towards that. I feel like a tool for freedom is something that is worth supporting and getting behind. Hyper-Bitcoinization just seems like some dystopian future of some hellish dystopian future with a lot of
Yeah.
violence and blood and war that's going to either take us to it or be the result of it. I don't know. I don't love that thought.
Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah. I hope we don't need it.
All right, man. Well, listen, we crushed an hour. It was kind of easy. We haven't even argued over anything.
No, we agreed on all things.
Yeah, we agreed on all things.
We are the same person.
Should we find something to fight about to finish on? What should we disagree on?
I don't know. It's a problem.
Giving platforms to scammers?
Well, well, that's a big one. That's a big one. Giving platform to scammers is an interesting one. I mean, you can just not let them speak, right? I mean, you let me come on, and I'm a scammer. I'm a known scammer. I don't know what's the point. What's the point of hearing Craig Wright speak? What's the point? How is it useful?
I think he digs a bigger and bigger hole for himself. Actually,
so you listen to him once, and maybe twice, but then what's the point?
I think, I don't know. I think he digs a bigger and bigger hole. I think what's going on with him right now is quite sinister. I kind of plotted out the long con that I think's in play with him, where there's a number of things happen at the same time. So firstly, trying to position himself as the Bitcoin creator. So give him some kind of validity with people who are kind of outside of Bitcoin, really. People who he can romance into investing in, whether that's VCs, Silicon Valley, whether it's governments and institutions. Also, the narrative that he's pushing against Bitcoin, where he's saying the dream is to create private transactions for drug dealers and criminals, and that's what Bitcoin is, and Bitcoin SV wouldn't be that. So he's creating like a moral difference between BSV and Bitcoin. And then the registration of the copyright, the patent trolling, and the further pushing the agenda that he is Satoshi and trying to win a legal ruling that will give some kind of narrative that he's Satoshi. To me, this all pushes for a long con, which is for the promotion of Bitcoin SV. What I can't figure out, though, is whether he has some belief that long-term Bitcoin SV is an opportunity to make a lot of money, or at the moment they're running some weird long exit scam where every time there's a pump, they're just selling off their mined coins. I can't figure it out in my head.
Well, why not both? That's what Ripple does. They sell on every pump, but they also keep some for the future. I mean, you can do both. I don't know. I don't know what the long con is. The thing is, I don't think he can. I've met some Craig Wright believers, I've met them face to face, and it doesn't seem like you can persuade them, just nope. Airing interviews with Craig Wright is not going to change their minds. And on the other side, I can see why you would do 1, 2, 3 interviews with Craig Wright, but after that, he gets interviews like multiple times a week, and I don't see the point, really. What's the point? I think it shows it mainly hurts the outlet, in my opinion. I don't even know. Sure, you're a very big podcaster and you're a big personality. If you interview someone, it's gonna get some attention, and sometimes that's a good thing. But what about everyone else? You have tons of very small outlets. What do they get from interviewing him? It seems like they're getting duped. It seems like he's fooling them. It seems like the easy way out is to just not have him on.
Well, yeah, I think perhaps though some of the smaller podcasters who might take him on know by having him on that's going to probably get more reach than any other episode. There's certain people that are easy to get to do that. John McAfee's the same.
Oh yeah.
If you get John McAfee, you get Craig Wright, you get Roger, you are going to bring probably more people to your podcasts and more downloads than you would get anywhere else. And it's
I don't think it's morally, I don't think it's immoral to have Roger Ver or John McAfee on. Roger Ver is an interesting person, even if I disagree with a lot of what he does, and I think that Bitcoin.com is a scam. Roger is an interesting person. John McAfee is definitely an interesting person, but Craig Wright is, as you say, he's dangerous. The people, it seems like the only good outcome could be for him because, you give him an audience, and then 0.5% of the audience is going to be people who just follow him blindly and join the cult, and the rest see an idiot and ignore. So it seems like it's a bad outcome.
Yeah, potentially. I never like to tell anyone they can't interview someone. I would never want to tell someone to do that.
I never said someone can't interview. Anyone can do whatever they can. Well, I would prefer them not to. I think that there was this guy who, we were both on the same thread, and there was this guy who interviewed him in the N-Chain offices, and basically let him go on a speech about how he's going to sue McAfee and how he's going to sue the world and how he's going to sue everyone. And I told him that it's a shameful interview because it was, it was a bad interview. It was shameful because it was an interview. He just let him go on a speech, which was insane, And he said things like, "Oh, you're probably the most prominent developer of Bitcoin," and so on. Which is just, you can do it. Everyone can. I can do it. Anyone can do it. But I think you shouldn't do it because it's unfair to your audience, and it's bad for you probably too because it makes you look stupid.
Yeah. Look, would I interview Craig again? I probably would, but more of a human interest story than a Bitcoin story. I don't really want to talk to him about Bitcoin anymore. But I certainly want to.
He doesn't want to talk about Bitcoin.
Well, I'm really as somebody interviews people, I'm intrigued to scratch the backstory, go into it. It will never happen now. I'm with you on Roger. I think Roger's done some fucking stupid things and terrible things, but I find him an interesting person. And again, I would talk to him again. But I'm also now in this position where I'm like, there's just no point because the fallout from doing that interview isn't worth it. And that's a shame, really, in some ways, because I feel, you obviously think I'm a bit of a whinger and I'm a bit of a victim sometimes, which is, fair enough. But yeah, after 3 months of harassment of one person specifically harassing me for months, saying awful, terrible things, hoping I get cancer and die like my mother did, it gets to you. I'll be honest, Udi, I try and maintain the thickest skin possible, but, after 3 months of harassment and those kind of comments and people creating memes and fake characters, blah, 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 when 95% of your show is Bitcoin, it puts a pressure on. So I'm now in a position where there's certain interviews that I would like to take, I won't take now because the fallout sometimes isn't worth it and the false accusations and misrepresentations aren't worth it. And that's the point of pressuring or putting certain pressure on people and some of the over toxic elements of Bitcoin, which are a bit of a shame. There are many people who now don't freely express their opinions because they fear the backlash. I get most of my conversations now, people are private DMs or private email. I get a lot of support for my work and they're saying, do what you do. But these people are sometimes scared to do it publicly due to the Bitcoin shaming that can happen. And I think this is where I'm like, okay, the toxic side is required because it helps defend Bitcoin. And, during SegWit 2x, if we didn't have some very firm defenders of Bitcoin, it may have hard walked away. And then on the flip side, I'm like, well, it isn't healthy that people are pressured in such a situation where they can't take on an interview what they want to do or express an opinion without being humiliated, attacked, and, harassed. That for me is also a dangerous area to be in.
Look, I agree with you that it's indefensible for anyone to make, physical threats or, just wish that a person's health gets deteriorated. It's really indefensible. There's no reason for anyone to do that. When I see those kind of things, I always reply, even when I'm not part of the conversation at all, because it's, there's no reason for anyone to go there. And, a lot of times it probably points to a personal problem with the person who's doing it probably, but whatever. I don't feel that it's, what most of the community is doing. I do agree that a lot of people are just saying, things like, this episode is stupid, this person is stupid, don't interview them, you don't get Bitcoin, things like that. Definitely. We definitely see that a lot. And is it good or bad? I don't know. I mean, look at the comments on every article on the internet. That's what people do. I mean, I don't think it's that special. You know, I've been getting a ton of it too. Definitely not as much as you, but I've been getting, you know, not from Bitcoin probably because of the way I behave, but I get a lot from, you know, from Ripple, right? I got terrible stuff from Ripple, from IOTA over 2017, 2018. I mean, it was some hard stuff. So, you know, I blocked them and moved on. Now, this isn't my business, so I can do that. You know, I don't care. I can see how, if that's, you know, something that you want to have as a business, you can just block everyone. But then again, you know.
No, I agree. I mean, you need criticism, and healthy criticism is good. And some of the healthy criticism I've had has really helped me shape what I do, like improve what I do, or have deeper considerations for the impact of the work. And I do agree with that. I think there's become almost an acceptable face of Bitcoin toxicity, which is too far, and it goes too far. And, you know, I'm in that split position where I'm like, well, it's free speech, they can say what they want. But at the same time, when you're harassing people, you know, I think it goes a bit too far. And I think it's a real shame if somebody is in this kind of journalist / pseudo-journalist role and they're feeling at risk from investigating certain things. So let me give you an example. I've been pressured very heavily by some specific people. They're like, call Roger Ver a scam, call Bcash a scam. If you don't do it, you're getting paid off right by him, blah, blah, blah. And that's fine, all well and good if you want me to say that. I'm not a performing monkey. Now, following my Mount Gox series, I do want to do one on SegWit2x. I think there's a very interesting story in that. To do that story, you have two choices. You do the story from one angle and one angle only, which is the Bitcoin angle, or you do it from all angles and you speak to all people and you try and knit it together to tell the story in a factually accurate way about what actually happened. If you want to do the latter, then you have to speak to some people that perhaps people don't like. You probably want to talk to Roger Ver, and you probably want to talk to Amaury and various other people, or, you know, Jeff Garzik. You want to speak to him. You want to speak to Barry Silbert. You know, there's all these people you will want to speak to create the story and to do the research. It makes that very difficult if the previous week you're going on Twitter going, Roger Ver is a scammer, Bcash is a scam. Okay, Roger, do you want to come and do an interview with me because I'm working on this story? It makes it very complicated.
Yeah.
So that kind of pressure to say that, and if you don't say that, then you're not a Bitcoiner, and then you shouldn't have any sponsors, and then fuck your show.
Here's what I would do. I definitely see why looking into the history of SegWit2x is interesting. And I agree with you, just interviewing one side, it even makes it less interesting, you know? Because if you want an interesting story, you need to hear both sides. It's not just about being accurate. It's just, you want the story to be interesting, right? So I definitely think you should interview both sides if you're going to do that. However, you know, experience shows that when you ask people about their involvement in SegWit2x in 2019, it's very different than what their public involvement was in 2017. You know, publicly, I'm not even speaking about the private stuff that went on. You know, we have the mailing list for SegWit2x. It's probably still live, where they had,
it's incredible.
Where they had their discussions on how, you know, explicitly how they're going to use SPV clients and blockchain.info wallets and so on to explicitly attack their users. They almost use that word. They're not saying attack, obviously, but they're saying we have those users and we can tell them whatever we want and we're going to. So, which is amazing in my opinion. And they're not going to bring it up in the interview, that's for sure. So, you know, if you're gonna
but if you speak to enough people, that will come up.
I mean, it would come up from the pro SegWit camp probably. But the question is, I would have put him on the spot. You know, I would have put the SegWit camp on the spot too. I mean, there were a lot of mistakes made, but I would definitely have made it a hard interview on them, and some of them wouldn't want to participate probably, but that's okay. Yeah, I think that would be very useful if you can put them on the spot, and that's again very useful for the pro SegWit camp too. I would be happy to send you some ideas on tough questions to ask, then it could be a very interesting story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it is an interesting story. I mean, it's a lot happened, and a lot of people were burned. A lot of people burned their reputations. There were a lot of interesting debates, understanding the human decisions versus what is science and what is math. I think it's all really interesting. I've got no doubt that if I put something together, people would want to listen to it. But like I say, it's very important that to do that, you speak to all sides, and it's just not productive to be going out there as the person trying to knit these stories together, also at the same time calling people scammers. It isn't a productive environment.
No, there's no need to call anyone a scammer, but I promise you, I'm convinced that if you bring on, someone like Mike Belshi, right, from BitGo, and you ask him, what do you think now about trying to make use of Bitcoin clients and blockchain.info clients and SPV clients to basically tell people what Bitcoin is? Do you still think it was a good proposition? Just ask this question, and whatever he answers, I think that if you do that, I think that people wouldn't say that you shouldn't interview them. The question is, are we interviewing them just to get their version of the story, or is it also to try to learn something about what really happened, what people really think about it?
Probably both.
Even when it's not nice to hear. And really, there's a lot on the SegWit side to ask that it's not easy to hear. So, yeah, if that's the kind of interviews, I think that people won't say that you shouldn't interview them. And again, even if people do say, who cares?
Yeah, it's a tough one to approach, and I'm not approaching it on my own. I've got two people specifically consulting on it who lived through it, who are helping me put it together, because I think it's important that it's done in a is most accurate way possible, and the most important thing will be the conclusion to it all. And I wrestle with how that will be pulled together, but I think that would be a very important part of it. So. Yeah, man. All right. Well, listen. Look, we've done a good hour and 20 now. That's over my standard amount. Glad we did this, man. It's good to speak.
Yeah,
to you.
yeah. It was fun. I'm happy we did a face-to-face chat.
Yeah, we'll have Pedro on next time. Tell people how they can stay in touch with you, how they can check out your work.
Probably they could go to my Twitter account, but I don't recommend it. It's a terrible account. Ideally, they just forget that they ever listened to this interview. But yeah, I hope that you will have a link to the Twitter account, because I can't spell it; it's too long. But it's Udi Wertheimer.
Yeah, no, I'll put it in the show notes, man. Okay, well, listen, look, good to talk to you. Take care.
You too. Thank you.
Okay, so how was that? Did you enjoy that? Did you enjoy my chat with Udi? Yeah, it was quite a different interview. Listening back, because I listen back to every show before I release them for edits and just to get the show notes ready. And yeah, it was quite different, this one. It was, I don't know, felt like we could have had a beer. It felt like a general kind of friendly chat, but it was cool. I think we agreed on quite a few things, which was quite interesting. And, I do really appreciate what Udi does and what he brings to the space. And yeah, I just, following that 2 Bitcoins thing, I think it was definitely worth getting them on and kind of clarifying my position, but also clarifying some of the things with regards to guests and, and also it was great to talk about Bitcoin. There's so many Bitcoin things to talk about, and sometimes I wrestle with things. So it was great to put some of those things to him. But yeah, I really enjoyed that. But it's super late here. I'm absolutely shattered. I'm actually jet lagged. I should be asleep now, and I've got to get up at 4 a.m. and head to Washington. So I'm going to cut this off pretty quick. If you enjoyed the interview, you want to catch up with me, you got any questions, you can email me on hello@whatbitcoindid.com. If you want to support the show, I can't be bothered to go through the list of things now because I just want to get to bed. But you can find out more on my website. Just head over to whatbitcoindid.com, click on the support section. That'll explain everything. Yeah, and as I said, I'm off to Washington in the morning. I've got a 7 a.m. flight, so I'm going to be pretty shattered. And then I'm off to spend some time with Charlie Shrem. But I've got loads of interviews planned on this trip, so keep an eye out for all of them. And if you want to reach out to me, as I said, my email address is hello@whatbitcoindid.com.